I'm ready. From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. For any of our new listeners tuning in this week to hear Jim's mom, we should explain she's not actually on this podcast. Sorry for any confusion or misinformation you may have received. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tanchman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Oh, Mom. Mom, don't ever look up Ice Cream Social.
I won't, honey.
My only solace is there's no way she knows how to find that. Like, I'm confident she doesn't even know how to get to our podcast. I'm pretty sure just being a Patreon, it comes in the email.
Hey, great job creating a challenge for all of our listeners out there.
To get it to her?
Yeah.
Oh, this has happened before. I remember there was another whole thing that went down where everybody was trying to get to her, and, like, people were tagging her on Twitter, and, like, there was this whole hunt to find her. I think Smitty ultimately did. So
there's also a big push on Twitter to have her back for our 100th episode.
I saw that. Yeah. So we're closing in on our 100th episode. If you follow us on any of our social media, on Twitter, Facebook, or Patreon, we didn't post it to Instagram, but it's because you can't really write things on Instagram. We're coming up on our 100th episode. It's going to happen in December. Mm-hmm. I believe it's like the 3rd or 2nd week of December. And we're taking all proposals for good ideas for things that we might do to celebrate it, do something special.
We'll even take your bad ideas.
Yeah, I like how one person on Twitter said, "Hey, for that episode, you guys should do bad advice," and you were like, "Yeah, no, we want to do something different than the other 99.
I want it to be different than the rest of the episodes."
So yeah.
Yeah, no, we've gotten some good feedback. A lot of good ideas. So
I think so too. Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun. I can't believe that we're almost to 100 episodes. I mean, if you really add up our entire library, we're at like 111. If you add up all the bonuses,
right? Yeah,
yeah. But numbered episodes. I mean, this one is 94. So we're almost there, man.
You can't count the things as episodes that you don't refer to as episodes.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. No, I'm saying the episode.
Why'd you bring it up?
I mean, I just want the record to show that
Why'd you bring it up then, Jim?
We've recorded 111 things that are in the feed.
Jim, I've never been more ashamed of you.
Go back to your cave,
also,
Mom.
I'm a bat.
Also, I'm a bat.
Nick, I'm sorry I didn't get the script for today's episode. I guess I'm just going to have to wing it.
Oh, Jesus. Anyway, so how are you doing with your sobriety?
Yeah, so my challenge was sugar.
Yeah.
And I had been doing really well.
Uh-oh.
So they had the ICS guys had the Jock versus Nerd Day,
which is also where these Jim's Batmom references are coming
exactly.
from. Yeah.
So I didn't really get to go to a whole lot of that because it just happened to be on Wednesday. I play hockey on Wednesday. Any other week, I would have just skipped the game, but it was playoffs. So we had to win the first one. If we won, then we would make it to the championship. We ended up winning both games. So we three-peated, so very proud of that.
Very cool.
But then I was able to get over there afterwards.
Yeah.
So I was only there for about a half hour, but I was able to kind of sneak in for a little bit. And they were like, "Oh, do you want some pecan pie?"
Oh, I heard this pecan pie was amazing.
Oh my god,
was it good?
Was so good. That was outside of my sober October thing,
right?
Because I'm eliminating excess sugar.
Excess sugars, yeah.
But this I think falls into the rare and appropriate category.
Yeah, of course.
It was something special.
Would have been bad manners not to.
And oh my god, it was so worth it.
Was it?
Oh,
so
you didn't have any of it?
Alternative to you, I did not have anything at that party. They had brisket falling off the bone. They had apple quiche. They had all this. I had none of it. I stayed on diet.
So, I supported Jim's diet while he was there. I did not. I did not offer him any food.
No, he did not.
And I did not bring him a beer.
Nope.
I brought him a glass of whiskey.
Yes, he did.
Which is low calorie.
Low cal, though. He brought me low cal whiskey.
No, can I ask you a question, Jacob? Would you have offered him anything anyway?
No.
I feel like that's beside the point.
I feel like that's not relevant to the point I'm trying to
make. Your Honor, relevance.
Yeah, this argument is not germane to the case. Yes, so I'm very and it was funny because on Twitch, because they live streamed the whole thing, and I was on Twitch talking to all the people in the chat room, and people were like, "So Chim's the diet gone?" Because everybody was talking about how good the food was. I was like, "No, I'm on point. Like I'm not indulging, so doing pretty good."
Now I had the pecan pie, and then
pecan.
Yeah, is it pecan or pecan?
Definitely pecan.
It's quit saying pea. Pecan.
Yeah,
there you
pecan.
Go.
Like
pecan
picante.
Pie.
Oh, it just sounds.
They're made of the same thing.
Okay. That's just true.
Okay,
that's just fact.
Picante salsa is made of pecan.
Anyway, it was good.
The point I'm trying to make is it was delicious.
But then last night had a Halloween party.
Oh, that'll do it too.
And then I'm also doing the intermittent fasting.
Okay.
Right? So it was outside of my eating window, but I'm already having a drink at the party.
Yeah.
And then they had some candy bars there.
That'll do it.
I'm like, no, screw it. So I had some of those too.
Okay.
But so a little bit of a lapse.
Not too bad. Not too bad.
bad.
I'm doing okay. Better than when we started this project. So for the most part, good. You ever played Mario Kart as a kid?
No, I was an adult by the time that that sucks.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Pong? is that where, should I be aiming it toward that? Pong? So you remember whenever you used to play hoop and a stick?
Yeah. No.
Kick the can.
Yeah, remember kick the can?
The paddle and the ball with
the
rubber band?
Remember that? Yeah. Good. Yeah, ball and cup.
Yeah.
So hoop and a stick is very similar to the metaphor I was going to make, which is when you're playing a racing game, there's the straightaways and then there's the turns, right? What I've found in this sobriety thing, my straightaway is Monday to Thursday. I'm great. It's not really hard. I just work all day and then I get home. And if I can just not be stupid, I'm usually okay. Yep. It's the weekend, right? That's when I slow it down. That's whenever I could bump into a lot of obstacles. I've been doing better. So when I started this project, I was at 236. My last weigh-in, I was at 229. And so I've come down, I think that's 7 pounds. So yay, I'm heading in the right direction. So, I think the last time we taped, I think I had lost 4. So I'm down 7. So I'm working in the right direction. That's good. This weekend, we went to the pumpkin patch. I took the kids to the pumpkin patch for a birthday party. And funnel cake got me. So that was a loss. That day, definitely over 1,500. I think there was over 1,500 calories in the powdered sugar alone. So
what do you think your calorie count was total for the day?
That day?
Yeah.
Enough to kill a horse. I think that it was bad. It was like funnel cake, birthday cake. That was there too. They had lots of little snacks. So that happened. And then we also got Firehouse subs for dinner, so that got me. And but for lunch, because I was off that day, and I took my son hiking in Red Rock, so I did a little bit of exercise. But before that, we went to Jimmy John's, and I got a sandwich, but I got an unwich, so it was wrapped in lettuce. So that
okay.
I did, but I definitely know I broke 1,500. So I probably broke it by 1,000. I probably was like 2,500.
Okay, well that's still not terrible.
Yeah, right. I guess not. But yeah, the bad day. I mean, but mentally I kind of called it a cheat day. Like I kind of like told myself, okay, dude, like this is not the pattern we want to build, but it's like kind of like your Halloween party. Like it's a special event. Like okay, try not to go nuts with it, but
yeah,
according
also
to WebMD, funnel cake is 760 calories
per bite. Yeah,
I believe so.
I believe that's
44 grams of fat.
Oh Jesus!
It is just fat.
It is just lard. Yeah, that's all that is. Yeah, no, it was bad, and they just like cover it with like cherries and chocolate sauce and powdered sugar. It was rough. And then I also got homemade lemonade, and they just take like literally a handful of sugar and they just put that in there.
Oh yeah,
it was.
I wonder
sugar
how many
water.
calories those beignets are in New Orleans.
I would bet not that much.
It's pretty much just like funnel cake, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the most part?
But they're so light. They're all air. They're just air with like this thin dough. So I don't know. Maybe just because the amount of mass that's in one is not very much.
I think it's about like a donut.
Yeah.
Probably about maybe a little less.
I ate those for 3 days straight, like every morning.
That will happen.
When I was down there.
Yeah.
Oh, those
The
are
call
so
of the
good.
pastry, man. The call of the pastry. So I did okay. That was my big stumbling
London
block.
book.
Jack London. This show is so highbrow.
I'm really impressed that I came up with Jack
No,
London.
that was legit. That was fantastic.
That was a good
yeah,
pull.
You reached way up for that one. I like literary humor. Very good.
Yeah.
So otherwise, I did okay. Yeah, and then for the most part, one of the things I've been noticing is on the weekends when I know that I'm going to have like a fun night or I'm going to do something special, I'm definitely trying my best to budget and just save up those calories. If I know I'm going to have pizza with the family or something like that, I'm trying to budget so that I have the calories to spend.
So this is good because this actually goes into our topic for today, because the topic today, I kind of put a bunch of things together. I put relapse, and then also threw lapse in there.
Yeah.
Because we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
But then also put in cheat meals or cheat days.
Okay.
Okay. So
Which
I guess,
definitely does not apply to all forms of sobriety.
Thank you very much. That was the next point I was going to make. I was going to
Disclaimer.
Yes, this is very
I had
important.
a coked up weekend in Vegas. It was my cheat day.
It was my cheat day. Yeah, no.
Get off my ass.
Oh, I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, there's somebody who stopped our podcast as soon as you said that. Did not hear
Yep,
the rest.
I know.
They're going to come back.
That's a great idea.
Wait a minute.
So we do need to clarify. There are some things that if you, because we made this open to anybody doing any kind of big lifestyle change.
That's right.
So it could be something behavioral, like going to the gym. It
Right.
could be something like changing your eating habits.
Yes.
You know? It could be something like giving up a substance.
Yes.
So
or
here's
gambling.
so here's the big thing. If it's something that you are giving up a substance or like a gambling behavior, if it meets criteria for an addiction
Yeah.
or a substance use disorder,
Yeah.
there are no cheat days.
We don't agree
You
with that.
cannot. Yeah.
Which is an interesting discussion that we often have with people whenever they're first starting their journey into sobriety. You know, we've had a lot of people say, well, I do want to get sober. You know,
Right.
I want to stop drinking. I want to stop using this drug. But God, I can't imagine the rest of my life never having another cocktail. And, you know, there are people that definitely agree with that, but I'm not one of them. And so usually what we tell them, and I think we've talked about this in Sober October, is let's just start small. You know, I don't want you thinking about year 20. I just want you in the now. And let's let that future you have the right of choice, you know, to decide what that will be. But for now, let's just work on your sobriety. But I think you're right. It is an important disclaimer that when a person is working on that initial month of sobriety, that initial 90 days of sobriety, that first year of sobriety, we're really not looking to give anybody any permissions because it's always dangerous. It could always turn into what you're about to define, a relapse.
Yeah. And that you know, I mean, somebody could be giving up alcohol and not actually be addicted to alcohol. Right. So in which case, if they do that and then they decide, you know, one weekend that they're going to have a couple beers or something like that,
Right.
and they don't actually meet criteria for a substance use disorder, are they going to be okay? Yeah, probably.
Sure.
You know, unless it's problematic drinking.
Yes.
You know, but for the most part, that's probably going to be okay. But if they have already crossed over that threshold, there's really no going back. You can't go from a substance use diagnosis
Right.
to then healthy drinking behavior or healthy substance use behavior.
And I think reaching a place of acceptance for that is very, very hard. Because even as I hear you saying, you know, if you're not addicted to it, if you're just a problem drinker, I'm thinking of all the patients we've had who would just go, oh, okay,
Well,
I'm
that's just
definitely
me.
just a problem
Right.
drinker, okay?
Yeah.
And it's like, of course you're going to make room for that, right?
Right.
And like, that's just the nature of the beast, is the addiction's going to ask you to make room for it. So we're almost always pushing people to just stay dry.
Exactly.
Like,
and
stay
I
off
think
everything.
the reason why this is, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail today, just in interest of time, but it has to go with the reward system in the brain and the amount of dopamine. So when we get a rush of dopamine for something and we get used to that dopamine being there and then that thing is gone, then our brain associates that rush of dopamine as being something necessary for survival.
Yes.
So based off of how much of a rush of dopamine you get, indicates to the brain how important it is for survival.
Right.
So when you actually compare it to food, if I were to compare methamphetamine use to food.
Right.
I may get a little rush of dopamine when I'm eating food, but that will pale in comparison to the amount that I'm going to get by using meth.
Yes.
Okay? So it confuses the brain into thinking if I go 2 days without food or 2 days without meth, my brain thinks the meth is necessary for survival.
Yes, that's why people on meth won't even eat.
Exactly. Yeah. They'll go days.
Yeah, their last dollar will go back into getting them more meth. So putting aside the cheat day concept, because we want to make sure that we can apply to the bigger story of what sobriety is and all these different tellings of it, let's zoom in on that difference between, this comes up all the time in substance abuse work, where people want to describe something as a lapse versus a relapse, and it's a very nuanced thing.
So there's different schools of thought with this. Okay. See, I've always looked at relapse as a scale, and we did this when Data Scoop was here, right? Mm-hmm. We kind of talked about this, and I always look at a scale from 0 to 10.
Yes.
And I look at 10 being the return to the use of the substance.
Right.
That's the relapse.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it is all of the process that leads up to it.
Right.
And people in early recovery especially don't understand these steps. And I use the analogy of like a snowball rolling down a hill.
Right.
If you're going to stop it, you have to stop it up at the top.
Yeah.
When it's the size of a softball. If you're trying to stop it down at the bottom when it's the size of a vehicle, a car.
And you're getting Indiana Jones down
you're going to get run over by it if you try and stop it.
Yeah.
So becoming aware of really small things that are happening that you can intervene and stop that. So that's always been my school of thought. And for me, it works really well in explaining this concept to people in early recovery. Mm-hmm. It works really well for people in long-term recovery. But not everybody fits in with that same philosophy. There's other people who like to use the term a lapse versus a relapse.
Okay.
And they will, and that's perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. I don't really, it's not something that fits with me. I don't really care for it. I like the other way of looking at it, but there's nothing wrong with this way of thinking, this philosophy, this idea of a relapse, a full-blown relapse is I'm 100% back into the same behaviors.
The pattern is reemerged.
The pattern. Yeah. So it's not just I'm using the substances. It's all of the things that go with the use I've also returned to. Yeah. So I've also returned to, lying to my family or this sneaky behavior.
Lying especially, deception. And you've abandoned your recovery behaviors.
Right.
You're no longer doing the proactive things that you had added to your life that were pushing you into the right direction.
Exactly. And then they would define a lapse as being, I'm still hanging on to a lot of the pro-recovery behaviors.
Right.
But I'm not full back into the relapse mode of the old pattern of behavior. So maybe I have used, a substance. Maybe it's not my drug of choice, but I return to that use or something. So they can call that a lapse. For me, I guess I would define that. I could put that on my scale, right? I would put that at like maybe an 8 or a 9 as being a lapse.
I see your point.
And then
because it's not so much an either or thing, so much as I think your metaphor is right. It's a continuum. Right. And so the metaphor I've always used, it goes hand in hand with your snowball thing. I actually like your snowball one better because it sort of implies that gravity. I always talk to my patients so imagine that sobriety is North Carolina and full on being lost in your addiction is Los Angeles, California. You and I are walking towards South Carolina. If you fall or you stand still or you stumble backward, I consider that like a lapse, right? Because you're not turning around. But once you start turning around and walking toward LA, you're abandoning all the progress we were making. You're no longer heading in this direction with me anymore. You want to go back.
Right.
And that's relapse mode.
That's a good way of looking at it.
And one of the reasons why I say that too is because I want you'll have patients sometimes who have a year, 2 years of recovery and then they fail and they go, oh my God, I'm back to square one. But one of the things you were sharing in the last episode is you haven't though.
Right.
And so that's the metaphor I usually use to help them understand that is, no, we're in Missouri. You're heading in the wrong direction, but the test of your recovery is not how many perfect steps toward North Carolina in a row you have. To me, it's how long do you walk backward before you stop yourself and turn around and start heading in the right direction. And that, I think, is extremely important whenever we're thinking about any of this problem behavior change.
In a way, I think you can be in low spots and you can be in high spots, but you're never going to be back in the exact same spot.
Yes.
Because you're always going to have new information.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the way that, you've seen that video online of we picture the solar system as being stable and all the planets flying around it. But the sun's also moving.
Yeah, faster than any of it.
Yeah, so then the planets are going around, and it's a spiral thing. So if you think about it, we are never in the same spot twice.
Right.
It's this kind of...
No, it's a very beautiful point. Yeah.
Right, same way of looking at relapse.
So relapse versus lapse. A lapse, I guess, is you have partaken in the behavior that you're trying to stop. Relapse is you are partaking in the behavior and all the patterns. You are walking in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And that's different than stumbling and not making progress.
And I think part of the reason, I think, too, why I don't really like the lapse versus relapse philosophy is because it becomes hard to define terms.
Right.
Which makes it harder to identify.
Yes.
Whereas if I actually use my scale, 0 to 10 scale, and we can actually sit down and we can have a whole individual session and talk about what does a 1 look like.
Yes.
And we can get really detailed.
Yes.
And we can identify patterns of thinking.
Yeah.
We can identify behaviors.
Risks.
We can identify environments.
Right.
And all of that stuff. And we can get very detailed.
Yes.
That philosophy for me works really well because then the more detailed you are with each of those points, they're landmarks, right? You know when you hit that landmark.
And then you can figure
because you've already described it.
I'm at a 2,
right?
So what is a 3? Okay, now I know what a 3 is.
Yeah.
And that insight.
And so if I know that a 3 for me is constantly maybe showing up for work late 4 times in 1 week.
Right.
Okay, that's very specific, and I know when I've hit it.
Yeah.
Right? There's no way that I can distort this or that I can change it. It's a fact. It's not based off of an opinion. And that's, I think, where a lapse versus a relapse, that philosophy is a little bit different, is it gets a little fuzzy. It's not as clear cut.
It does. And what you're describing right now, I think for the general audience is so important because when we think about addiction recovery, a lot of people aren't surprised that we're going to sit down and learn about their history. That's important, to discover some of the patterns and where this all started. Most people could predict that we would probably want to do that. Most folks could probably predict that we'd want to talk about triggers and, that we'd want to help you develop insight into the little invisible strings that kind of pull you into these behaviors. I don't think that most people would expect that we would also be seriously interested in describing in nuanced detail all of the slow motion train wreck that is a relapse in your life, trying to get you to understand in the past what happens. I remember whenever you and I ran that sober living, one of your best moves that I always thought was a really quality strategy, whenever you'd meet a new resident, you'd interview them and you'd get all your basic questions answered. But one of the things you'd ask them is, if you start down the road of relapse, how will I know? If you don't want to tell me, okay? Because that future you is not going to want me to know. But right now, you're the most honest I'm ever going to meet you. You're coming to me right out of rehab. You're on team recovery. You're just excited to be here. So tell on your future self. Tell me how to beat you at your own game. And they would spill it. They'd go, okay. Yeah. And you'd interview them in this very strategic way where they would okay, so if you see me isolating, that's the beginning of this. And if you see me not going to my AA meetings, that's another thing that's setting the stage. And I'm not taking my medicine. And they would one by one.
Yeah, and they were right.
Yes.
No one knows them better than they do.
Yes.
And that's the other thing, with this, the really important piece, I think, with all of this is that you don't want to wait until you're in a house fire before you have a fire escape plan.
Exactly. Right.
So that's part of why we have this discussion about what this looks like, because you can't wait until you're in that relapse moment to then be like, oh shit, now what do I do?
Right.
This is not a planning time.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
This is an action time.
Yes.
You need to have planned in advance. So you can use the same philosophy when we're talking about eating healthy. Right. And we're actually going to get to that because the next thing we're going to talk about is cheat days, as we call them, right?
For food only.
Exactly. For food. Thank you. But also, being aware of, how you try to talk to yourself when you're going to take action.
Right.
Because there's going to be this push, as we talked last week, of how you're going to try to talk yourself out of taking action.
Yes.
So you're going to recognize I'm in this process.
Right.
You're going to know what to do, but you also have to be aware of how am I going to try to talk myself out of doing this?
Yes. You have to get ahead of it.
Exactly. I already know how I do this when it comes to going to the gym.
Okay.
Because there are days that I just don't feel like going. And I know how I'm going to try to talk myself out of it.
Yeah.
And part of it is with time. Like I'll
go in a little bit.
dilly-dally around, and I'll take my time getting ready. And then I look at the clock, and I'm like, well, I don't have time now because now I'm going to have to come back, and I got all this stuff. I know how I do that. So then my way of thinking around that is deal with it.
Right.
Okay, so if you're only there for 15 minutes, you're only there for 15 minutes, but you're going.
You're going, yeah. Yeah, no, I totally resonate with that. Like when I think about the way that I might future talk. So like when I anticipate, okay, what might relapse look like? Under what conditions would I negatively talk to myself? I think for me, it's the efforts, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where it's like, well, you're at this special party, you know, like it's this very quality thing.
You know what I told Laura last night?
Huh?
Because I went in and I reached for some of these like fun-sized candy bars, you know? And Laura's like, "What are you doing? It's Sober October."
I told her,
and you know what I told her though? I said, "Yeah, but tomorrow we're talking about relapse, and I have to have something to talk about."
Way to sacrifice, bud. Way to sacrifice for the quality of our art.
I did this for the THERAPAL.
Wow, man. Yeah. Well, you're really a hero, Nick.
Yeah, I agree.
But that totally does happen, where you just get to the efforts, or you're like, this is a special event, or, you know, and you do talk yourself into it, and you say, oh, come on, you know, this is, or the cheat day mentality. This is just a cheat day, you know.
So let's get into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheat days are dangerous things to play with.
For those of you who are doing something similar to Jim, where you've got, we're talking about healthy eating, and it's not necessarily something that's addictive, right? How do you feel about cheat days? And I want to get your opinion on this first before we even get started.
So again, very much being an amateur at this, I don't have, a list of victories that I could say, here's how I win. Like, I don't know what winning looks like. I'm still meandering my way through this game. One thing I think I've learned for myself, the only cheat day that is okay for me is if I've pre-planned that. Because if I just leave that on the table for myself, I don't trust myself. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I can't just leave it there and be like, oh, well, I have this to fall back on. Because then I'll just conveniently use that as my excuse. Whereas if I tell myself, this Saturday is my official cheat day. I get it this week, this is what it is. And even that is not infinite calories, because I know me.
Yeah.
If it's like, all right, I'm already wet, I may as well go swimming. This is it.
Yeah.
You can take in 8,000 calories in one day and nullify the week.
You can absolutely. And it's funny when you actually sit down and do the math.
Yeah.
So if you're going to drop down from 2,000 calories a day, which is your base.
Yeah.
If you drop that down and your new plan is 1,400 calories a day.
Yeah.
But then on that last day, you get 5,000 calories.
Yeah. And that's what
sit
happened.
Sit down and do the math.
That's what happened my first week.
You've lost the whole thing.
That's exactly what happened my first week.
Yeah.
So I guess the 2 points I would have when you ask me, what do you think of a cheat day? My first strategy or principle would be, it can't just linger around in my back pocket. It's allowed to be used, but it needs to be purposely put on my calendar. And then the second thing is, it still needs structure. It still needs rules and boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've
more
put
of a
together
flex day than a cheat day.
I put together a list of tips.
Okay.
So keep in mind, I'm not a nutritionist.
No. But you play one on TV.
Yeah. I play one on a podcast. So this is stuff that I've just put together from my own personal experience.
Right.
It may not apply to everybody. It's not just personal experience. It's also experience just kind of understanding the human mind.
Okay.
And kind of how we operate, how we think.
Okay.
All right. So but again, this is not written in stone. I don't want anybody saying, well, this is what Nick on Pod Therapy said. No, okay.
I promise you, nobody has ever used you as gospel.
All right. Well, you didn't have to be a dick about it.
Actually, somebody cited us in an academic paper once. Yeah, do you remember that?
Yeah, that scares me so much.
Oh, it was Chelsea. Chelsea did it.
So one of the things that I would advise, we need to keep it to a cheat meal instead of a cheat day.
Okay, there you go. Good job.
Right.
Okay. Not cheat day, it's cheat meal.
Exactly. And one of the things, too, that you had mentioned was that the importance of planning ahead. And that is very important.
Yeah.
You have to know your pattern of behavior. You have to know your own weak spots.
Yeah.
And you have to plan ahead for some of those things.
Can't be anarchy.
Right. So one of the things that I'm hearing you talk about is that, you said earlier that the week is my straightaway.
Yeah.
The weekend are the turns,
yes.
right? That's where it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing that, I can tell you that planning a cheat meal on a Friday night is a bad idea.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Because that's already a weak point.
Because then you have the whole rest of the weekend
to get through.
If you plan your cheat meal on Sunday night,
it's more likely that I'll look forward to that. It'll keep me honest.
You're going to be back on track on Monday morning, right? So you are limiting the amount of time that you have to go crazy.
Yeah, because Monday I'll just slam right back into my straightaway, and it's like, well, I can't do much, so keep on going.
Right.
Interesting.
And for me, I know my pattern of behavior is if I work out that day, I tend to eat better that day.
Yeah, because you started it differently.
I don't know why it is exactly, but when I work out, I don't have a craving for a pizza.
Okay.
It's like my body knows, like, okay, we just went through all of this. We have to replenish with
something decent.
Some veggies, a chicken breast. We need to do something to reload. Right?
Okay.
But that's just how my body responds to it.
Right.
So I know my body. I know my weaknesses.
Okay.
My weaknesses are on the days that I don't work out.
Right, because then the stage is sort of open.
Right. My off days are Saturday and Sunday. Now, if I really wanted to, if I'm planning, so I'm going to today, let's say today is going to be a cheat meal later on in the day. Maybe I'll go to the gym this morning. I'm not going to do a full workout, but maybe I'll just get on the treadmill for 20 minutes or something. Yeah. Right. And it's going to limit that craving that I have for that food. I know already just how my body operates.
Okay.
It's going to decrease that craving. So maybe instead of ordering Domino's and then getting that delicious cookie brownie thing, that dessert,
that's crack.
Maybe then I would just get just the pizza instead of getting everything.
Harm reduction, that counts too.
The other thing too, as far as planning ahead, is plan for that meal only.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need a large pizza.
Right.
Because then what happens?
You're getting leftovers.
So you force yourself. Like if I'm going to have a
pizza
cheat
for
meal,
breakfast is going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to get a whole box of Twinkies. Why do I need a whole box of Twinkies?
Right.
If it's just one meal. Then,
that's a very good point.
Okay. Somebody else. I watch. There's this YouTube channel that I watch a lot, Athlean X.
Okay.
And he's a personal trainer. And he was like a personal trainer for the New York Mets. And he kind of brought up something about this concept. Mm-hmm. And he made a really good point, which is that if you are talking about cheat meals and cheat days, you're setting yourself up to fail.
I see. Because
essentially what you're saying is that this is what I really want.
Right.
And the way I'm eating now isn't what I want to do.
Okay.
And actually, it goes back to what Blake said when he was here last week.
Yeah, it's just my job.
He said the best diet to have is the one that you can stick to.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Whatever plan you have.
Yeah.
That's the best one, whichever one you can stick to.
Okay.
So if you're looking at it from the concept of this is my cheat,
right.
Essentially you're saying I'm already doing something that I can't do.
Good point.
So maybe take a look at the way that you are eating.
Yeah.
And are there changes that you can make so that it doesn't feel like it's something you're forcing yourself to do?
Well, yeah, and I think that the word that I feel more comfortable with is it's a flex day. And so, like, I just think about it, because cheat to me is like, go hog on the damn thing.
Right.
Whereas, flex is like, okay, man, you can go above 1,500 on this day, because you're going to, and what that ultimately allows me to do is select a meal that itself is sort of likely to break 1,500, like pizza, or sushi. Like, it's just going to go over it, or you can't have any of it, and so it's like, that's really what that is. It's a flex meal.
So I mean, from that perspective, then you're kind of looking at it from like I keep track, I count calories, I watch my food, and instead of saying like, now I'm going to have something that I want, you're actually saying for the next hour, I'm going to not focus on it.
Yeah.
So it's not focusing on it as opposed to I'm just going to shove a whole bunch of terrible food in my face.
It gets out of control really fast.
Another thing too that can be very helpful is 2 hours prior to your meal.
Yeah.
Have a meal that's full of protein, veggies, complex carbs.
Okay.
So you're giving your body what your body needs.
I see.
And it's going to kind of curb some of that hunger a little bit.
Okay.
And it will keep you from going too crazy.
Yeah, that's a smart idea. Yep. Kind of pad the landing there.
Yep. So I mean, that's
good tips.
That's pretty much it for.
No, this is really good.
To use.
So for all of you guys out there that are working your program for Sober October, the lesson for today is the strategy and value and importance of not just what it looks like to win at this day after day after day and how we structure victory, but also to study defeat, to understand what conditions indicate that you're on your way down that hill, that your snowball is getting bigger, or that you've turned around and walked in the wrong direction. And whether you're choosing the word lapse or relapse or whatever, decline, it's an opportunity for you to study what conditions indicate that you're heading in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. Notice that a lot of those conditions are not just the eating of the food or the drinking of the beer. It is the mentalities that go before that, that lead to ultimately the behavior. Before behaviors happen, mentalities happen, perspectives happen. And just as important, I think, Nick, with that is also using that study to teach you what positive things you can be thinking about that push you away from relapse. Like I know for me, when I wake up in the day and I start with an attitude of gratitude, I log 5 things for the day that I'm deeply grateful for, and I'm not allowed to pick the easy ones. Can't pick kids and work, I have to pick like nuanced things, and they have to be fresh every day. I find that I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. Right. I don't think, oh, woe with me, I didn't get a cool taco, or I don't care. Like I'm happy. I'm aware of the good things in my life. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. So really good topic. And for those of you that are, if you not so much a cheat day, but perhaps a flex day, there's a way to structure that in, but you've still got to be strategic about it, or it will quickly become the snowball, and it will quickly just be you putting that softball down and letting it roll. So you have to be very, very mindful of it. It has to be planned, and it only applies to people that are doing food. Does not apply to anything else.
Exactly. All right. Well, we have an update from Frozen 49th.
We do. Frozen 49th, who came on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she went to Tournament of Kings. She had a really interesting encounter. She sent us a little note to just kind of summarize what it was like for her. She says, "The night starts off with a bit of nerves, but I knew that going in. As the time came to enter, we waited to get in, and I could feel the adrenaline start a bit more in earnest. By the time we got to our seats, I felt that I needed one last bathroom break. Here's where it starts to gain speed. I know that instead of butterflies in the stomach after years of stage acting, singing, and test anxiety, I know that when I feel like I have to pee, it's my nerves. The bathroom is all the way out in the back of the arcade. F, 1 star, poor design. I made it in about 2 minutes before the lights went down. The how-to song starts the crowd up. Food and drinks arrive, and we are getting into the show. The Mordred makes his first appearance. Now, people, do you remember that he uses fire at the castle? That was the first trigger from Scoop Fest, where I stopped eating and those around me saw me flinch. I was ready for it, but not for where it was based out of. Yup, next to France, where we were sitting. I got through it, but only because I remembered that. The main fight. Hubby put his arm on the back of my seat, but not touching me so I could face it myself, but still had him ready and nearby. I began deep breathing, noting the smells and sounds more than the fire itself. I made it all the way through the scene with very little flinching, but at the height of the scene, my heart rate went to about 142 beats per minute. The lights came up after the horse princess scene, last dance, and the crowning of the prince. Spoiler alert. I will totally admit that I was crying. I did it. The whole show and no turning away. Hubby looked at me and I said, happy tears. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I didn't overthink what the outcome was going to be, or indeed what I thought it should be, so I wouldn't question any of my involuntary actions. My end heart rate about 20 minutes later was 103 beats per minute. I did it. Thanks everyone for the well wishes on Twitter, Facebook, and the personal messages. Your friend, Frozen 49th Scoop.
That's awesome.
That's great. Congratulations. She did the flooding technique to face something that gave her anxiety, which was the fire of the show, and was successful. She got through it. I thought a very good strategy of noticing sights and sounds that are not the fire. And smells, and just taking it all in, preparing yourself, telling yourself, here's the part where this is going to happen. I'm waiting for it. It's going to be fine. I'm looking forward to this, and getting through it. So, yeah, the only thing I probably would have changed in that is if she was monitoring her heart rate throughout the thing, I probably would have had her not do that, because I think that can increase anxiety. But I know that she probably just looked at it afterward and just figured out what her readings were. So, congratulations for Frozen 49th. That's great.
Yeah, that is awesome. Thank you for writing in and giving us an update. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will discuss what can I do to work around my brain. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Producer sponsor is David Datascoop Villalon. Datascoop was an American short story writer, essayist, biographer, historian, and diplomat of the early 19th century. He is best known for his short story, Rip Van Winkle, and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, both of which appear in his collection, The Sketchbook of Datascoop.
No, that's not. That's...
Oh, The Sketchbook of Joffrey Cran...
Jeffrey.
Joffrey. Is that not
No.
Joffrey? Jeffrey's with a J! That is Joffrey. Geoffrey.
That's an alternative way of spelling Jeffrey.
I feel that is Joffrey.
Definitely Jeffrey.
No! There's an O in it! You know what? We need a linguist on this show. If you'd like to join Joffrey and make the show possible, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
All right, we're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next question, what can I do to work around my brain?
Hey guys, I'm a relatively new listener, and I've been thinking about asking this for a while. I am ADHD, or at least I think I am. For the most part, I am successfully treating this with coffee, and I do not have a problem with getting to work and my job. My problem is when I after work, when I get home. My problem is I have a list of things I need to complete before I go to bed, and I really don't enjoy them, but it is the odd person that takes pleasure, but I am the odd person that takes pleasure in doing chores. Yes, I feel good once I actually get them done, but when I am sitting there with technology calling to me, I just dread doing them. As I type this, I have just forced myself to complete this bright and early at 1 a.m., so 5 a.m. is going to get here soon. What I'm really looking for is ways to fit my urges and not allow myself to procrastinate so long before I finally get up and move. I feel like I just do not have enough time in the day to do everything after I get home from work, but I am sure it is just my inability to just get up and do what needs to be done. Thank you. I'm going to retype this in the morning, just in case my ADHD got in the way. So I'll send you guys a more readable version after I've had some more caffeine. Thanks, Anonymous. Well, we use this version anyway. Yeah. This is a good one.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, do you think this is an ADHD thing? Or
not so much.
Yeah,
I think that ADHD gets used as slang to just mean short attention span or inability to concentrate and focus. Obviously, I don't lean toward an actual diagnosis on this, and I think he's being fair about it too. The writer's saying, at least I think I am, and that word is helpful to me because it helps me know my own personality. So the real question that I'm hearing here is not so much the ADHD, it's how do we do things that are not fun, that we have to get done, and how do we get out of that deep well of a couch whenever you're holding your phone or you're watching TV or you're what is it? Newton says a body at rest tends to stay at rest, and a body in motion tends to stay in motion.
Right.
How do we go from rest to motion? You once, Nick, had a technique that you were teaching us about the 5-second rule or something.
Yeah.
What was that again?
It was something Mel Robbins came up with it. So she now does a lot of like motivational speaking, TED Talks, stuff like that. And it's kind of this, basically the philosophy, the theory behind this is that your brain is meant more for inhibited behaviors, inhibitory than excitatory.
Okay.
Right? So it's more likely to stop you from doing things than it is to push you to do things.
Okay.
Right. So, but essentially her kind of argument, and I'm probably saying this completely wrong, but she's not a listener, so who cares? But ideally, that what her argument is that you've got basically 5 seconds before that kicks in.
Okay.
So if you're going to go, if you set your alarm in the morning and it goes off, you have 5 seconds to get your feet on the floor before that part of the brain talks you out of it.
Yeah, I see. So you have to attack with urgency, and if you can do that fast enough, you can actually get ahead of that filter that's going to come in to hold you down.
Exactly. So if I'm sitting on the sofa and I'm watching TV and I know I got to finish doing the dishes, I have that thought coming in my head, I need to do the dishes. 5, 4, 3, and I should be moving.
I see.
I should be getting up.
There's
I should
like
be
a
heading
boom
over.
Countdown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've tried it. And it actually works pretty well for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works well for everybody, but I mean, she seems to be making a living off of it, so I hope it works.
Yeah, no, I think I think there's definite truth to that, and it kind of aligns with what you were telling us earlier about going to the gym. That if you wait too long, it becomes its own boundary that it stops you from doing it, and so it's that catching of momentum.
I think your brain will find more reasons to stay in the status quo than it will to get out of your comfort zone and do something.
So one way, Anonymous, that I have attacked this in my own life, and actually the exact example of chores, because I'm just like you, like, already do enough in life, already, at work, already living, and getting things done. And then whenever you get to the end of your stuff and you have like this whole thing of chores on a day that you're off or whatever, you don't want to do it. One thing that I've kind of done is that whole like spoonful of sugar helps medicine go down. I started queuing up my podcasts.
Oh yeah.
So like I have a book on tape and I have my favorite podcasts that I kind of intentionally save so that I'm only allowed to have those whenever I'm doing something I don't want to do.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, it was riding the bike in the morning and doing some cardio. I don't want to do it. Like, when I wake up, I want coffee and I want to watch the news. I don't want to move. But I definitely enjoy listening to certain podcasts or listening to my book on tape. And I'm like, I want to hear what's next in that story. But I've made a rule for myself where I am forbidden from listening to that story unless I am on that bike. Or the same thing with chores. Like if I'm going to vacuum or clean, whenever I do my chores, I do them all. Like it's like a 2-hour sequence. But I promise myself I'm allowed to listen to my favorite podcasts during that time. So I put in a little wireless earbud, and then I just do all my chores. And really, I don't feel like I'm even doing the chores. I just feel like I'm listening to my show. You know, and then that makes it a lot better for me because then I have something to look forward to.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. I used to do that too with cleaning. Just have music. Like music just makes cleaning go a lot easier.
Yeah.
But then I always have to be careful that I'm not spending 2 hours trying to decide what music do I want to listen to while I do the dishes.
I call that the Netflix effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never actually watch the show. You just sit around. Watching Netflix with your partner is literally just sitting on the couch picking something for 2 hours and checking your phone. Yep. So Anonymous, I think those are both, really effective strategies is, capturing initial momentum and also, sugaring it, giving yourself something that's really fun to look forward to when you're doing it. The last tip I might have is to gamify it. This is a really popular movement that you're seeing come out of Silicon Valley. And to gamify tasks is to essentially create some kind of fun like reward system or leveling up system or achievement system where you do these tasks and you have a way to keep track that you've been doing them. And so like if you have a spouse or a roommate or something like that, you can create like a, high scoreboard or something like that where tasks earn 10, points or whatever. And then, whoever has the top, points of the week, that person gets to pick dinner or whatever. And so sometimes that kind of thing can get you motivated.
You millennials.
You damn kids with your hippie hoppy. Good luck, Anonymous. And I'm sorry if you're a millennial and Nick just hate speeched you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we discuss parents who hoard. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Their Producer sponsor is Judy Schneider. Judy was an English novelist who wrote the Gothic novel Frankenstein. Ooh, I know this one. Or The Modern Prometheus. She also edited and promoted the works of her husband, the romantic poet and philosopher Jake Schneider. Well done, Nick. Her father was the political philosopher William Godwin. Wow, I didn't know that. And her mother was the philosopher and feminist Mary Wollstonecraft. If you'd like to join Judy and make the show possible, you can go to www.patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Jack London.
Nailed it. The call of the Prometheus. Jack London.
All right, our next question is about parents who hoard.
Man, Frankenstein, a.k.a. Modern Prometheus, that was probably one of the most meaningful books I remember from high school. Like, I remember that one, like stewing on that and being like, wow, that was great literature. That was like the first book I ever read as a kid that I was like, that is what it means to be a classic, like a very good book.
I honestly don't remember reading a classic book in high school.
Oh, really?
I remember them being assigned.
Yeah. Well, as Mark Twain said, the classics are books we've all heard of, but nobody's read.
Yeah, that's so true. Very true.
Yeah, so there's only been a couple of those books that I'm like, oh my god, that was actually really good. I just want to seem really.
I liked Slaughterhouse 5. That was probably one of my favorites.
Okay, now that one was by
Kurt Vonnegut.
Kurt Vonnegut. I have never read it. The only reason I'm even aware of Kurt Vonnegut is because a podcaster and YouTube personality that I really like, John Green, lives in the town that guy's from, and he's a writer, and so he references him all the time. That's the only reason I even am aware of the guy.
Oh, you should read it. It's a
Slaughterhouse 5 sounds like a horror movie.
That's good.
Okay, this letter, Parents Who Hoard. Hi, guys. I've started listening to your podcast on the way home from visiting my mom's house. Yes, you read that correctly. I visit my mom's house instead of my 81-year-old mom. She bought a house 45 minutes away from me in 2015. Oh. What does he say?
She visits her mom's house.
Instead of
her mom.
She has yet to live there. Oh, wow. So she bought a house 45 minutes away in 2015. She has yet to live there. It is more like a hotel for her, hence the need for me to maintain it while she is away. But her tons of stuff is there. How much stuff are we talking about? A 3,500 square foot house stuffed to the gills, including the attic. Same story for the garage, which also has an attic, and if that wasn't enough, she bought a shed that is 10 by 32 and also crammed that full. A funny, sad story.
A big shed.
That's a big ass shed. A funny, sad story about the shed. So much stuff in the shed that the boxes collapsed and fell into the door, thus tumbling out of the door. This stuff is primarily dishes and glassware, nothing of material or sentimental value, mostly acquired from garage sales, and some items are just in case. Just in case she decides to start a service to providing weddings, but she is physically unable to set up for these imaginary weddings. I have recently learned that she has 5 more sheds of stuff on her home property in Florida. I am overwhelmed by her stuff. I have cleaned, glued, sewn, reupholstered, washed, soldered, rewired, etc. her stuff to make it serviceable. My big worry is that she will get hurt by either tripping on the stuff or it will collapse on her. I cannot reason with her to donate the stuff as she thinks it is worth money. She is financially secure, so this behavior is maddening to me. I have even thought about arranging an anonymous buyer and buying the stuff from her to then turn around and donate it or throw it away. Because of the clutter, the house has not been cleaned in several months, so I worry about her health, which is very poor to begin with. There is stuff blocking a few of the doors, which I think is a fire hazard. I realize that this is probably a 3C situation because she is a grown-ass adult who made this mess herself. I personally worked on renovating the house with my family and friends, and it was beautiful. Now it looks like hell, and I don't want anything to do with the stuff or even go in the house because of the clutter. I'm not allowed to do anything to change the situation, else she will get pissed off and cry and carry on. What can I do to accept this situation? This weighs heavy on my heart, and the burden is negatively impacting my own life. My husband refers to my situation as dealing with the dead, and that I should focus on the living. Happy to talk further. Thank you, Susan.
Right. Wow.
Big one.
Any experience with hoarding?
Yes. Yeah, I've had a couple of situations where that's been the case. I have found that hoarding is there's several, I think, key ingredients that seem to show up with hoarders. The first is the perception of value. And so there's this cognitive distortion that's almost like FOMO, like fear of missing out, which is, well, how do we know that this painting won't eventually, be the antique that they're looking for in Raiders of the Lost Ark? You know, and so like I can't get rid of any of these because what if there is value to it? What if I throw this away and then I miss it or needed it? Or, and there's this idea of like, oh, she's 85 years old. And she's like, oh, one day I might start a wedding company where I plan and host receptions. You're 85. That is not a realistic use that you're going to suddenly get a forklift and go through all this. It's just, but there's this delusion.
Right.
And so that's the first ingredient I tend to notice with hoarders, that they have this delusion of value, that the stuff matters and that they know what it all is and don't touch it because it all matters to them. Sometimes it's just sentimental. Sometimes they actually think it has real value.
Or that it will have value later.
Later, yeah. That
like
they're collectors.
I know, or even things that they're not, like I know some people that will collect, like I saw this on, I think like Dateline or something, where they were collecting those little plastic square things that you have on the end of bread bags.
Oh, yeah.
Just thousands of them. Because in their mind, they're like, well, if I get rid of those, what happens if I need one?
Right.
Then I don't have them.
And so there is this delusion of scarcity and this delusion of value. And so typically hoarding, I think, primarily has that delusional aspect of it, which this is the other key ingredient that I was going to mention. To me, it's very much, it harkens to the addiction qualities. And here's what I mean. In addiction world, the brain cycles through this natural feedback loop that's being subverted to basically hack out this really menacing behavior that actually is playing on real human survival instincts of pursue pleasure, right? That's okay, but it's being hacked. Hoarding is similar to that, in that resource gathering and feeling safe or feeling like you have valuable things is a normal human behavior. And so that is wired into us to do. Humans will create shelter. They will gather items. They are curious. They, all of us to some extent are collectors of things. But hoarding is that concept, that cybernetic process gone rogue, to where it's feedback looped upon itself, and now obviously it's at an unhealthy place where there's clinically significant distress because the person is now in danger like this. Right. And it's always very difficult because I think the way you fundamentally treat it is also very similar to an addict. It's about stages of change, and it's about, like, mom right now is in pre-contemplation about the problem. She cannot see that this is a problem, which is why husband tells wife, listen, Susan, let the dead bury the dead. This, you can't discuss this with her because she's blind to the problem itself. And so it becomes like this thing where you have to have an intervention to even knock them into a lane where they can be changed.
Right. Now, there are a few things that the writer is doing very well.
Yeah.
Okay, so number one, I think the most important thing that I've learned in working with people who hoard is that the absolute worst thing you can do is go in there and fix the problem behind their back,
right,
without them knowing about it. If you go in there and you sell stuff, or you start getting rid of things or throwing something away, that's, people think, well, if I just get rid of this, that'll solve the problem. Right. If I just reset this back to normal, then everything will be fine.
Right.
It won't. It will probably get worse.
Right.
Because now they're gonna get it all back, and then now they don't trust you.
Yeah.
And you've violated, their personhood. Like, this is all part of them. They see this as all part of them, of who they are.
Right.
And that could be disastrous. The other thing that the writer mentioned was the 3 C's. Mm-hmm. So I believe what she's talking about are the 3. They're most commonly associated with Al-Anon. Mm-hmm. The 3 C's, which are that I didn't cause this, I can't control this, and I can't cure it.
Right.
Which is a very important thing for a family member to remind themselves on a regular basis.
Yes.
Because family members struggle with this, and they want to go in and they want to cure it. Mm-hmm. They want to fix the problem. They want to take care of it. Mm-hmm. Or they feel like there's things that they can do in which they can start to gain control over it.
Yes.
And that none of that is true. The starting point for this has to be, I think, going back to what Jim was saying, going back to those stages of change, her being able to recognize that this is a problem and being willing to do something about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's where maybe some kind of intervention with a specialist could be beneficial.
I think so. And Susan, I feel for you, right? Because this person is 85 years old. There is sort of this mentality of, like, live and let live. And this is what is powerful about hoarding. It's this war of attrition. It's not as obvious as other process addictions, right? And that's how I mentally categorize it. I'm not sure the literature supports my conclusion, but mentally that's how I file it.
Is it process addiction?
I
mean, it almost kind of seems very OCD. I mean, I've always seen people associate it very closely with obsessive compulsive disorder.
I agree with that, but only insofar as I also see OCD elements in addiction.
Sure.
I think that it's just, we're talking about the same concept of obsessing thought and compulsive behavior, and I think that is similar to what hoarding's happening too. So it is something that's treatable, but this is one of those categories of problems that I do think bedevils people because it's difficult to confront the loved one, especially whenever they're sort of like this pack rat who's saving everything, and it's like it happened over years and years. It's not like all of a sudden they went to a storage shed and just came home with all this crap. Like it's something that started where the boxes were just in the garage, and they started taking up an extra room of the house. Then they're in the guest bedroom. Then, oh, well, there's a shed. And then it's like, okay, now I can't even live here. And especially if she's financially secure, where this delays the clinically significant amount of distress, because now she cannot live there. She can live somewhere else and just own an entire home and have that home, 3,500 square feet, just be dedicated to storage. And like, who's to tell her that that's a wrong use of her property, right?
Yeah.
Like that she's allowed to do what she wants. If she has a condo that she prefers to sleep in, then, it becomes very, very difficult. But that's not to minimize the distress that it would cause any sane person, Susan, who loves that hoarder. The answer to your question, though, and I think that this is a very smart question that she asked Nick, because she didn't just say, how do I fix my mom? She said, so I'm here to talk about me.
Yes.
I need to have peace. I need to be able to walk away from this. And I think that Nick is pointing you in the right direction. Al-Anon, which is a shortened version of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's not AA. It's not the group that people go to who are drinking. It's the group that people go to because they have a family member in their life or a friend, what we call a qualifier, who is addicted and doing these acting out behaviors. And they go to fellowship with each other, to read important literature, and to support each other in those 3 C's that Nick talked about, boundary setting. And I think that that's the only path to peace that I know of, is essentially learning, discovering, and implementing healthy boundaries between you and that other person, giving them the dignity of suffering and failure, and being able to start that process to move yourself back from that emotional moment. It's not easy to do.
Well, I think the other thing, too, to take a look at, Susan, would be to look at ways that you can, because ultimately what we're talking about is your own happiness,
right?
How you can come to peace with this. Maybe one of the ways in which we take a look at how to do that is adjusting your own expectations. So if your expectations are that she is going to live a quote-unquote normal life and that we're going to completely solve this problem, then maybe that's not a realistic expectation.
Sure.
Think of how you could adjust your expectations so that you can, even if it's not perfect or it's not ideal, it's not what you want, but it's at a spot where you can be at peace with it. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, if my mom was in this situation, if her house is just cluttered and there's just a ton of stuff, if I can get to a point where, okay, fine, you can have your stuff, I just want to make sure you're safe.
Yes.
And we address safety aspects of it.
Yes.
All right, so let's allow the hoarding, but let's confine it to these areas. And let's move, let's make sure our exits are clear. Let's make sure we've got space all around. And
that's
we can
a
do
good middle ground. Or, and I wasn't sure if this is what she meant by the 3 C's in her letter. I wondered if maybe it was a reference to like a legal code in her community. I don't know. I think you were right, but the way it read, I almost thought maybe she's talking about calling in a social worker. And actually, that is the thing I would probably tell her. For what you're saying in your letter, where you say, I'm worried about my 85-year-old mother's safety, that is a valid concern. You are not making that up. That is real life, okay? Fall risk is a very serious thing at that age. Not having access to escape routes in your home, and if boxes are stacked at the shoulder height or above, that is dangerous. That could fall down on her. And so there is such a thing as calling, usually it's 211 or 311 in your city. It's non-emergency services, to tell them, I have a family member, I'm concerned for the adequacy of their living situation. I'm concerned that they are in an unsafe environment. They may qualify as a hoarder. You can actually request a wellness visit that the city or your county would schedule with the person to come, because that is part of the health district's jurisdiction, to make sure that a home is safe to be habitated. And if it's inhabitable, in their professional opinion, they will sit your mother down and say, listen, you're an American, you have the right to do whatever you want. These are the minimum things we are going to order you to do by state law, or we're going to come in here and take all your stuff. And a lot of times that's a good wake-up call, because whenever they're like, holy crap, there's laws that forbid me from doing this for health reasons. Yes, you can't stack it above this height. This is the rules when it comes to the safety, inspection, like, getting out for fire lanes. And, I think that is a path.
And hopefully they'll be able to hook her up with a professional that can help her with
that. They
that.
probably
would
make recommendations.
Or with a social worker or somebody that can, help her process through that. And not just say, let's just move it, but let's actually talk about this. This
is why I liken it so much to addiction, because if you don't allow somebody to experience the consequences of their actions, change is not possible to them. It's not available to them, because they lack insight to even understand that this is a problem.
Yep.
And I'm sure if I interviewed your 85-year-old mother, she'd say, oh, my daughter Susan's such a worrier. I'm just, sentimental, and I have a lot of stuff. Who cares? I'm an old woman, and I've collected a lot over my journey in my lifetime. Yeah. Okay, but she's failing to see the danger of it, whereas a social worker or a healthcare employee for the state would come in and say, hey, your opinion be damned. We have laws,
right?
And we are not going to knowingly let you stay in a situation in which you are inhabitable. This house is not livable by the health standards of our city. We can't allow you to do it. Right. And so that sometimes is a wake-up call because somebody goes, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was that bad. Yes, it is that bad, and here's what we're going to do about it. They won't take all of her stuff, but they'll say, these are the 5 things that need to change. We'll be back in a week. And that's whenever she calls you and says, hey, Susan, I got written up. Like, come move my stuff. And so, that's damage control anyway.
Yeah. And if you've got other areas of support or other people that you can, that can join in and help out with this, and that could be beneficial too. This all reminds me of my grandmother, basically, because she's kind of like this. I mean, she's not a hoarder by any means, but she's a pack rat. Like, if you want a history of Iowa, go to her house. She's got newspaper clippings from when Lincoln was assassinated. Like, it goes all the way back. And it's always frustrating because she knows she needs to start getting rid of some of that stuff. And then so she'll invite my mom and my aunts over and say, okay, well, let's go through and let's get rid of some of this.
Right.
But then they get over there and then she's just like, no, I don't. I want to keep that. I want to keep that. I want to keep that too. I want to keep that. And they don't get anything.
Sometimes I've seen that trick done with elders of the family where you bring over the grandchildren or you bring over the nieces and nephews and they say, hey, we'd like to inherit this stuff. Are there things that you wouldn't mind gifting to us as part of your legacy?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes the elder's like, oh, well, yeah, that's great news. Like, I'm glad that you guys are going to hold on to it. I was kind of saving it for you anyway. And then, each family member, like ants, descend upon the house, basically getting everything out of there. Like, maybe they all agree, like, let's keep it in our garages, like, or whatever, but you could disperse. So, But Susan, at the end of the day, the only path that leads to your mental wellness and your well-being is essentially the path of boundaries and learning what you can and cannot control, sign for, or take responsibility for. This is why we're pointing you in directions like Al-Anon, like Nar-Anon. Even though your loved one's not a substance abuse person, it's still valuable insights about boundaries and creating that sacred space for your own peace of mind.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for writing in.
Yeah, and thanks for putting up with us. New listeners to the show. Hopefully we didn't blow it.
What should I do if I really don't want a history lesson about Iowa?
Then don't go to...
I don't remember you having an option.
That's just going to happen. Nick's grandma's on the way.
Come to peace with this.
Well, we do want to thank our newest THERAPOD. We have a new THERAPOD that's jumped into the mix. Welcome to the party, the THERAPOD, Matthew Neer, I think is how you pronounce that. So glad to have you aboard. Thank you for sponsoring us at the THERAPOD level. And what about our bosses, Nick?
Yeah, we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite 8 and Mysterious and Shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the TheraProducers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr., Ment, Chairman of the Board, Kayla Lansbury, David Data Scoop Vialon, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, and ex-officio board members Ellie O'Dare and Dan Martin.
If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our side projects like Sober October with our journal entries and responses, you can go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you all for supporting mental health. That's all the time that we've got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others. You can open this episode's description and copy and paste the link provided to a friend or family member who you think needs to hear the show. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Mary Shelley.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
That was one of the authors, right?
It was.
Mary Shelley?
Did you get the first one?
Okay, the first one, that was...
I hope you know this one, Jim.
Shut up, Ma! That was the one who wrote Rip Van Winkle and Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Yes.
Ichabod Clay.